Good evening, folks. Welcome to Grab a Stack of Rock. Tonight, we are talking about our origins with heavy metal music, and I will bring on our panel of experts one at a time. First of all, from his music corner of the world, it's Johnny Metal. Ooh.
Oh, hey.
Hey, Johnny Metal. How are you doing?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'd like to introduce you to somebody that you introduced me to. It's Metal Roger.
Rock and roll.
It's almost Roger? Like I'm his son.
Oh, that's right. And
the Metal Dad.
Last but not least, our guest of honor, first time here on Grab a Stack of Rock. I'm so pleased to have Mr. Reed Little from the Contrarians.
Good evening, everyone.
How you doing?
I don't know what it is, but I had this amazing urge to grab a stack of rocks just a minute ago, but my hatred of going outside prevented me from actually doing that.
I have a stack right here for you.
I appreciate that.
And I have some spiced Coke for you, so there you go.
Now that goes.
I have an enormous jug that I can do wraps.
Now enormous jugs I can get behind. Wait, what is this show rated? I'll try. I'm going to not be a pig tonight.
We can drop F-bombs if they're spontaneous.
Okay.
We have Henry Wright in the house tonight. Henry, how are you? And we have Ben. Hey, brother, rock on.
Henry and Ben, my guys.
So tonight's topic came from just casual chatting with Johnny. And I mentioned to him, our stories of how we got into metal. That everybody seems to have one. And I thought this would be an interesting topic to cover. So I've pulled out a whole bunch of my records from my formative years. I've lined up some questions I'd like to ask you guys. But first of all, I just want to say, to read. Thank you so much for coming on for this first time. Ever since doing that very first show with you, the Vinnie Vincent on Rock Daydream Nation, I've been a big fan, and I especially loved your financial breakdown on the Faster Pussycat financials. Oh my God, mind was blowing that night.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this. Pardon me.
Henry is coming to us from New York. And Johnny, are you getting bait by Coke? So, this is earlier today I posted that I'd bought a bottle of that on Facebook, and now we're all trying it apparently. Okay, so Henry might not be around long. Shall we get started, gentlemen? Johnny Clouser.
Okay.
This came up, you and we were talking about our youths and the early albums that we were into. I know you've pulled a lot of records tonight, but I'm kind of curious from everybody, what were you listening to, if anything, before you discovered the glory that is the music that we love the most, that is heavy metal?
Do you really want to know?
I want to know from all three of you. So I thought we'd go in a round here, Peter Kerr style, Rock Daydream Nation, and just start with Johnny Metal.
Okay. All right. Well, I will. I'll just kind of show mine off as a quick little round. So this was, when you're in the Clouser household, this is one thing that you get a lot of is Johnny Mathis. My mom is a huge fan and has made me a huge fan. So this would be one thing. Now, what else was I listening to as a very young lad? Well, there's also Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh, that's great. Johnny, are these your mom's records?
Oh yeah, the Johnny's Greatest Hits wasn't, but she still has her copy. But the Fiddler on the Roof and this next one I'm about to show you, these are still my very original copies that my family's had.
Oh, cool.
Godspell.
Yes.
My sister was a fan of that. I find this on 8-track. I eventually found this on vinyl. This is a comedy album. Anybody who knows who Victor Buono is, he played King Tut on Batman, the original Batman show with Adam West. He's a character actor. Nobody probably knows who he is, but he did a lot of things about his weight.
Okay.
Come on, John Denver. Who doesn't love little John Denver? Funny story about this. There's a track on here called The Box. It's a poem. It's a long poem. YouTube it. It's very interesting. As a young child, I memorized this.
Wow.
Don't ask me why. Now, again, having a sister who is 15 years older than me and a brother who's 13 years older than me, then here's what I start transitioning into. So I get introduced to something like this.
Ooh.
Little Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Yeah.
And this is not the original copy. This is something I picked up recently, but I've loved Lamb Lies Down on Broadway since I was 5. Although some of the songs scared me half to death. Who doesn't love? How about a little Status Quo? I see these guys and this is my brother's original copy, and I see these guys on the front cover, and I'm just enamored by how these guys look. The hair over the head. I was like, what are these monsters?
Yeah.
Something told me I listened to this as a lot with my brother. The Sensational Alex Harvey Band, Tomorrow Belongs to Me.
Wow.
My brother got to see these guys live a couple of times. I would love to have seen them live. That would have been very, very awesome because I've come to love these guys. And this is still my brother's original copy. So thanks, Chet, for letting me keep it. I'm introduced to stuff like this. Supertramp, Crime of the Century. Great album. I promise I'm coming to an end on this stack. We loved K-Tel, so this was here. This. But the album that finally started getting me geared towards more rock and roll, hard rock, was when I was probably in first grade or so, and I see this album cover, and I'm just like, I'm begging my dad, please get this for me. Please get this for me. This is the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I don't know what enamored me about this, and I recently just picked up a vinyl because I don't have my originals anymore, but this.
Yes.
Dressed to Kill. This was the album that I saw at an old store called Two Guys. And this is what introduced me to hard rock and the music of that nature. I listened to it to death. I loved it. There was some, I don't know what it was about. I don't know why I liked it. They were like my heroes growing up. And so Kiss has always been that special part to me. You know, the 70s Kiss especially. My brother picked this up. And this is the original copy that he picked up. Still have it after all these years. Love this. I love the first Boston album. One last one, and I'm done with my early years. This one I have to thank my sister for. I didn't even get into the CDs portion of this. Alan Parsons Project, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Edgar Allan Poe stuff. Again, what's enamoring me to this? Well, this, but also the original. In the original version, there's a booklet in here somewhere. Oh, here it is. You get this booklet with all these weird pictures and images and stuff. And I'm just like, as a kid, that just enamored me. And I was just drawn to that. And well, there you go. I didn't even get into some of the CDs of stuff that of formative. Well, yeah, I'll go through this really, really quickly. This scared me to death as a kid when time would go off.
Right.
My brother, big fan of the James Gang, loved this and live in concert.
Ooh, you got a Mobile Fidelity there too, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother was a Steppenwolf fan, so I heard like Born to Be Wild, The Pusher, and songs like that at an early age. Sparks, Kimono My House. My brother had this album. He still does, I think. Again, I look at these guys. You know, what's this guy that looks like that German guy that,
right.
As I'm thinking as a kid.
It's that mustache.
Yeah, it's that whole mustache thing. Fool for the City. Come on. Loved. My brother was a huge Foghat fan, as was I. You know, I got turned on to Night Shift. Loved this album. My sister had this, Steely Dan, Royal Scam. Absolutely love the album. I was exposed to a lot of wonderful, awesome music.
I can see.
So as whether it was prog, whether it was just straight up rock and roll, boogie, whatever you want to call it, there was so much stuff that I was exposed to at such a young age before I even turned 10, before I even turned 8, you know. So I had a pretty healthy start to my early years. So there you go. That's my quick start. So
thank you, John. Mine's going to be quite a contrast to yours. Roger, how about you?
And look, I have props.
Yes!
Oh my gosh, Roger has props?
Yeah,
Holy
I
crap,
think
Jesus must be
frozen
coming.
over. Anyway, when I was younger, my mom used to have a vinyl player and stuff before she turned into a lame person, and actually used to listen to good music like this.
Yeah,
I'm an Elvis fan, and
Oh,
look,
boy.
it's still wrapped up. I don't know how the hell that worked. And look, this is all of my Elvis. See?
It's a classic. Elvis's Golden Records.
Your mom.
And here's another one. Christmas. Huh?
Another
Blue
classic.
Christmas. Listen to a lot of this as a kid. This used to be in the record player all the time.
Can you pull back a little bit? I can't read the title.
There you go.
Almost in Love.
Yeah. Let's see where the rest.
Where's
of
Marco when we
Elvis
need him?
is.
Because Marco would be
Marco's
away
a
for all these
huge
things.
Elvis fan, but apparently Henry's an Elvis fan too.
I love Elvis. I've always loved Elvis.
See, as a kid, I was you had either had to be an Elvis fan or a Kiss fan, and I was greatly
have Kiss
outnumbered.
too.
Oh, Look at that artwork. That's the jacket and everything. Like there was something about his image in that 70s era that I'm personally attracted to. I love that image.
That was the early reason why I would wear a leather jacket.
That's cool.
Yeah, that and John Stamos.
Why not? Why not?
Why not? I would have thought it would have been for like the Fonz myself, but you know.
Yeah, for me it was the Fonz. I grew up with the Fonz, and then a little bit later on in the early '80s, Rick Ocasek.
My wife said that's before my time, but I know the Happy Days song kinda.
And let's not forget Sha Na Na.
Bowser. Yeah. You know, funny enough, I actually wrote a story when Rick Ocasek passed away several years ago. I wrote a story called Black Leather, and it was about these guys that gave me that image, and it was Rick Ocasek and Bowser, and yeah, and Happy Days.
And I don't have props of this garbage, but I had a weird stage that I would listen to the Backstreet Boys.
It's okay.
I have no clue why.
No judgment,
Roger. This is a place of openness.
Yeah. I still do technically.
That's fine. You know what? I'm gonna say it. Okay, that song "I Want It That Way." That is a great song. And if like Bon Jovi did that song,
I did Millennium myself. But
I kind of sing the
Never heard
cars with my friend and put that on.
You do it without your friend too.
Get him, Liz.
Sold out.
I don't know why I have her in here. The cat would be better because the cat doesn't talk.
Well, thank you for opening up and sharing.
And then it gets worse when I grow up a little bit more. I got forced into country music.
Hey man,
and I hate country music.
Liar.
I don't know what she's.
Get him, Liz.
Anyway. What was I gonna say before my wife interrupted me like a normal day? And then my cousin.
Hang on. We got a comment here. This conversation is going off the rails. Yeah, let's get off the Backstreet Boys, Roger, please.
Oh no.
We're losing viewers.
I was just gonna say how my cousin gave me a brain and introduced me to rock.
Okay, we will get there on the next round.
Okay.
Now, Reed,
Jesse, what's going on, brother?
I know Reed has an interesting story because the last time that I worked with you on Rock Daydream Nation, you were talking about, coming down into the city. So I'm curious where your musical history begins.
Okay, so before I get into that, I want to talk about Sparks because if I don't, I'm going to lose the train of thought. I swear that when I first heard about Sparks from Marco at the Contrarians, I thought he was making it up. Somehow I went through my entire life until like 2 years ago without ever having heard of Sparks. And I thought people were freaking pranking me talking about Sparks and this weird music. And they could not convince me that was a real band until I watched the documentary on Netflix. And I was like, what is happening? I felt like the universe shifted under my feet and like the entire universe was pranking me. So I'm still not convinced that Sparks are a real band, despite the fact that they have actual like 16 or 17 albums out there.
I think even more than that.
I think that's the universe just playing around with me. Anyway, so I grew up in a very music positive household. My father liked country music, but not what you would certainly not bro country. I mean, that didn't exist. We're talking about, I was a kid the easy way to remember it is I was a kid in the 70s. I was a teenager in the 80s. In the 70s, he liked Grand Ole Opry style country.
Okay.
So like the Statler brothers. And we would watch Hee Haw every Sunday. So talking about like Roy Clark and Buck Owens when they'd be a picking and a grinning. So that style of country music, Grandpa Jones, he had amazing musicians on it for such a stupid cornball show. The music was amazing. But I never developed a taste for that music. My mom liked kind of late 60s. I don't even know exactly what it is. It's not pop, but like Tom Jones. She liked a guy named Engelbert Humperdinck,
Yeah.
who disappeared in the 70s. I haven't heard that name from anybody in a very long time. She loved Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. She loved Paul Simon and Garfunkel. So we had some music around the house. When I was very, very young, I'm talking like 5 or 6 years old, I was a huge fan of the movie Willy Wonka, the original.
Yeah. Gene Wilder.
And with Gene Wilder, yes. And it has this massive hit song, The Candyman. That song was a huge pop culture sensation. And I used to go around the house singing that. So my mom went out and bought me an album. Now, I love my mother. This is how clueless my mom is. She went to the store looking for The Candyman. And what she came home with was an album by The Candymen.
The Candymen.
Yes. So she thought it was a kid's album. It was not. They were a Grateful Dead style jam band, very heavily influenced by Bob Dylan. They have songs about nuclear war. I know it's on YouTube because I looked it up not too long ago. I was like, was I hallucinating that? No, here it is. The Candymen. There's this song, Even the Grass Has Died, which is a song about in the future, after the nuclear war, we're all going to climb into our bunkers and live underground until even the grass has died, and then we're all going to die off. So I was listening to this at 5 or 6 years old. I had a little crappy turntable, kids turntable, and I listened to that album over and over and over again. Those guys eventually became the Atlanta Rhythm Section.
Wow.
So from a very young age, I was listening to country and rock and roll. And then that's what was at the house. Other than that, it was really just whatever was on radio. And we're talking AM radio at the time. So music was just kind of by availability. But when I listened to music on my own, it was that completely inappropriate for a 5 or 6 year old kid Candyman album. And I listened to a lot of Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. And that goes until 1977 when I have my first big change in musical taste.
Interesting. 1977 figures into my story too, but in a different way. When I was a kid, my parents were into very different things. My dad was into marching bands, John Philip Sousa. He had some Pavarotti records. He listened to a lot of Johnny Cash, which enabled me to see Johnny Cash when I was about 9 years old. And my dad met Johnny Cash, has his autograph locked away in a safe.
Nice.
But I was very much more into TV shows and movies. And Doctor Who has very remarkable music. If you guys know that synthesizer piece that opens that show. And there you go. Roger knows it. And I've been watching a lot of Doctor Who recently, and I just relish every time the opening credits start. You know, I just love that music. But in 1977, everything changed when this film was released. And I don't think I had the original soundtrack when I was a kid. I think I had those story records. Remember those story records? I think John might have been showing one earlier. But that's what we had when we were kids, were the story records. You know, there were no VCRs or DVD players. You buy the record and listen to the music and sound effects and dialogue. The first one that I remember getting an actual soundtrack was this. And this was a double album. My sister owns it today. She got my Star Wars albums when I moved out of the house. But there's something about this kind of music that relates directly into what I would later get into. Everybody has seen novelty bands tackling the Imperial March in a heavy metal way. It's all here. My roots of heavy metal are all here. This is it. The Imperial March and the Asteroid Field and so many of these pieces are so deeply ingrained, so that when I was getting a little bit older and maybe a little bit more desperate to fit in with my peer group, and I was exposed to this heavy metal music, I was able to latch onto it very easily and quickly. You know, it was familiar. And, you know, a lot of these bands would do these acoustic ballads, and they wouldn't be that different from some of these Johnny Cash songs that I was hearing. So, you know, the roots were all there. I kind of drifted a bit after Star Wars ended. I got into where did I put my records? They're there. I got into a band called Styx, first of all. You guys know Styx. They had a big hit in 1982 or 3 with Mr. Roboto. And
very much,
Mr. Roboto. My buddy Alan at school had that record, and I had to have it too. I was very much like a follower. You know, if my buddy Bob had a yellow bike, I had to have a yellow bike. That's a true story. Alan Runstetler had this band called Styx, and I fell in love with this song, so I had to get the record. And it was a beautiful gatefold, and I wish I had it, but I must have lost it in a move because I don't have it anymore.
I would like to say I'm actually banned from playing Sticks in the house.
We might have to have we'll have words about that offside for sure.
Oh, I love Sticks. My wife hates them.
Oh, yeah, I gather that. This came along the same time period. I was 11 or 12 years old when this came out. Come on, Feel the Noise, and I had it on cassette. This is not my original copy. It was a white shell cassette. I'll never forget it. And I played the crap out of that. And it was my favorite thing in the whole wide world. But I still wouldn't say that I was into metal yet. This was just the latest thing. It was, you know, Star Wars, it was Styx, and then it was this. But the real change wouldn't happen until December 26th of 1984. But I will save that for my next round. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this at the top of the show, but Jex Russell will be joining us in about half an hour. He has to put the kiddies to bed, but when he joins, we'll get him caught up on these questions as well. Sorry, Jex, I didn't mean to forget you. I was just getting all caught up with the show intro and everything else. Anyway, Johnny Metal, next question. There must have been a moment, a tipping point. There must have been a focal point where you said, I'm a metalhead. What was it? What was the band? What was the song? Tell us the story.
Well, you know, as a term of metal, I think I was still I was still kind of transitioning, you know, so I was reading a lot about, there was a lot of bands I was starting to read in magazines like Rockline, 16. You know, I wasn't into Cream and Hit Parader and Circus just yet. So I was still into Kiss. And so the next wave of probably was when this trifecta would come along. I think it was 81 was when I first heard AC/DC, and I think it was something from Dirty Deeds.
That album was reissued in 81.
Yes, correct. So, and that's because they were riding high on the popularity of this, which, of course, this was also still getting some play on the radio. So I was hearing a little bit of everything of AC/DC. So that was like the next band I started getting into. But then I think another turn came through reading some of those magazines, that I would also hear about this band out of California. There's a little 4-piece band. They had a couple brothers in the band, and but the first album, I didn't hear about these guys until about 81, and this was my introduction. Talk about an introduction to this. I mean, the first album is amazing, but this was the first time I ever heard Van Halen. Oh my God almighty. That intro blows me away. To Mean Streets, Dirty Movies, I still love the whole album. Great album. That would be another turning point. Then I would kind of start hearing about this other guy who was playing with some crazy British guy who used to front a band in the 70s that I hadn't heard of yet. But once I heard about Randy Rhoads, well, that was all she wrote for me, because, you know, between this and Diary, I was hooked. I was hooked on both of those albums. So, but then what that would do would be, it would lead me backwards to I think I heard this first.
Uh-huh.
Then eventually I would get like paranoid and somebody gave me Master of Reality or whatever. And so I started hearing, okay, this is interesting. But then I would get introduced to Robert Plant, which would then further introduce me to these. Then I become a Zepp head. Okay. I realize I'm probably not even answering your question because I don't think I know when exactly I became like an actual metalhead per se. But I think the album that finally made it to me to be a metalhead was probably this.
Okay.
Screaming for Vengeance. When I first saw the video for You Got Another Thing Coming, and you get that chugging, dun, 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 and I was like, okay, I'm starting to get a hold of this. This is me. This is what I like. I seem to strive for this kind of style, this kind of music a lot. So I think I would really want to say this was probably the album that really tipped the scale and say, okay, this is the direction I need to go in.
Excellent. That album also figures it into my early history. So spoiler alert, that's not the last time we're going to see that album. Metal Roger, was there a specific moment where you said, you know what, I'm done with Backstreet Boys, I'm done with country, I'm a metalhead and I'm going to buy a Suicidal Tendencies hat and wear it with a Slayer shirt? Was there a moment in your life where that happened?
Firstly, I never listened to country. I got forced to listen to that crap. I did not like it until when I was older and like Johnny Cash. Anyway, yes, I remember actually. It was 1999, the first time I heard Slipknot. I remember hearing them, and I was a very angry kid back in the day.
Okay.
Still an angry adult, so I don't know if I grew up or... Anyway, what was I going to say? I heard the album, and I thought, what the fuck was that? This is great. I want to find more. And then I got into a band called the Deftones because of a cousin of mine, and that was pretty much it.
How do you go from Justin Timberlake to Mike Muir? That's a really, but I'm guessing that there are several steps involved.
That's a weird. There's some weird bridges.
Wait.
Kevin.
Well, to answer
Justin
that
Timberlake-
question, can I actually answer?
Isn't he
that
NSYNC?
question? Huh?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Justin Timberlake,
he was in
that's
NSYNC. Yeah,
That's not Backstreet Boys, man. It's not Backstreet Boys.
Did you just quote NSYNC for Backstreet Boys?
Somebody just confused NSYNC with Backstreet Boys.
Not me.
Oh.
No, he didn't. No.
Them's boy band fighting words.
Yeah, my wife's now angry.
Sorry, Roger. I apologize.
Anyway, to answer that question, there's a video game called Tony Hawk, and that's how I found Suicidal Tendencies.
Through a video game. And was that around the same time as you were discovering Slipknot and these other bands?
I would have to research that one, but I don't know.
But were you craving
Probably.
a Pepsi when you heard Suicidal Tendencies? That's the question.
I only drink Pepsi with Jack Daniels, so no. And I didn't start drinking until I was 14, so that was 4 years later.
And that's for another show.
That's a whole other show.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard my wife saying,
Uh,
"That's something you should have met on a show."
Anyway, it's Reed's turn. Reed, well, what about you?
Okay.
Was there a turning point?
There were in fact two very specific turning points. I maybe should have brought up the first one first. So this is 1977. We had moved, actually in 76, we moved to a small town in Utah. And it was in a brand new housing division that was on the very edge of town. It was all like tumbleweeds and new houses. And we'd been there about a year. And then 2 houses down, this is one of those great just pieces of serendipity in my life. 2 houses down, another young family moved in that had a boy who was 1 year older than I was. His family owned what we used to call a dime store. Think of it as a very small scale Walmart, for those of you who have never heard of that term.
Mhm.
They sold everything, right? Like you get in a CVS or a Walgreens now, I guess is maybe a better comparison. But his parents loved music, and they sold records at their store. And my friend, he had not the crappy little kids turntable I had, but an actual stereo. But when I met him, you know, I think, skateboarding there in the little cul-de-sac we lived on. And so we sort of met and started talking. And he's like, I'm the world's biggest Kiss fan. And I was like, great. I have no idea who that is. And he said, well, here, come on in. So this is how I can date this precisely, because he had just gotten a new copy of the Kiss single that had Christine 16 on one side and Shock Me on the other. And that was in June of 1977. So
Yeah, Love Gun. Yeah.
at the time, this is before Love Gun even came out. Love Gun came out very shortly after that, but it was the
Okay.
advanced single. Can you imagine releasing Christine 16 as the advanced single? Shock Me was the B-side. So I still remember this very vividly. They were working on the house. The basement was unfinished, and he had this stereo in the bottom, and he played me this song, and I thought it was terrible. I mean, compared to what I had been listening to, which was, you know, Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass and all of these people from the 60s and really solid musicians, I was like, this sucks. And he's like, what do you think? I'm like, it's the greatest song I've ever heard, because I wasn't about to tell my new friend that I didn't like his band. So he had posters. He used to buy every magazine, Teen Beat and 16 and whatever. They always had Kiss posters in the back. And he had them plastered all over his room. And he points to a picture of Ace and says, Ace is my favorite. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, no.
So I had no idea who any of them are, but even at 9 years old now, I was a huge science fiction fan. So I picked the guy with the star on his eye, because I had no idea what a star child was, or that it was supposed to reveal his sexual prowess. I just knew that stars equal science fiction. So I picked the guy with the star on his eye, because he already took the spaceman. It's like that guy with the star. And he's like, Paul. I was like, yeah, Paul's my favorite. And I don't know if that set into motion the fact that Paul really is my favorite, or if that was just one of those weird coincidences. But anyway, we used to listen to everything. His parents would just get in whatever record was popular. So I remember Fleetwood Mac, but he would play Kiss Alive all the time. And we'd play Rumors, and those are he actually put on Black Sabbath Paranoid. His parents loved the Paranoid album, and it scared the crap out of me, and I wouldn't let him play it anymore. Because of the song Hand of Doom, where he's talking about shooting up heroin, and he just keeps going, he put the needle in. I was like, nope. Pause right there. Nope, not listening to this. So that was my first encounter with Black Sabbath, and that would pay off dividends later. But my point here being, I had to love Kiss because my friend loved Kiss.
Right.
And my parents got me copies of Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. And they hated that music so much. Now, I was never what most people think of as a rebellious teen or as a rebellious kid. I did my own thing, but never in order to piss off my parents.
Right.
So when my parents were like, we don't like this music, then I would not play it in the house when they were there, because I didn't want to offend. I was like, I'm a polite kid, man. Maintain good relationship with your parents. So they bought me the Beatles. Remember, they had the Red album and the Blue album, which was like the first half of their career, the second half of their career. They bought me the Red album, and I had a Beach Boys best of. And the day that Elvis died, we got Elvis Presley's Greatest Hits. So I used to listen to those albums. Oh, and the soundtrack from Saturday Night Fever, which I think also came out 78, maybe. But so we would listen to that. And then we actually moved to a Washington, D.C. suburb where I met kids, now big market. So there's a big radio station. I met kids who were I remember Leonard Skinnard, especially people were big into an REO Speedwagon and AC/DC, but I didn't really pay much attention to that. I still just had my little selection of records that I listened to. And then we moved away from the big city. So I feel like that was wasting a whole couple of years where I could have been listening to mass market radio and really been exposed to pop culture. Because then we moved again, this time to a small town in Montana. So this is where I've talked about living up in the mountains, no rock radio, period. You could not, there were rock stations in Billings and Great Falls, but they were on the other side of the mountains. So those radio signals did not get to us. If you were going to listen to music, you had to own it. I didn't know anybody that listened to rock. I have an older sister. She was not a rock fan. And then one of the kids at school got the soundtrack to Heavy Metal, the motion picture. And this is the other thing that I can date very precisely, because that came out in August of 1981. So exactly 4 years later, almost, I heard Ronnie James Dio screaming, "Oh, come on!" at the beginning of Mob Rules. And that is the literal point at which I became a heavy metal fan. Those 3 syllables, "Oh, come on." And on the other side of that, I was like, that's it, I'm done. Just to put away all of my pop, my non, and I was like, this is it. This is my life from now on. Wow. And Dio's my guy. And because I had no exposure to pop culture, I remembered that Black Sabbath was that band that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid, but I didn't know that they had changed singers. I hadn't heard him in 4 years. I didn't know that he had been in Rainbow. I didn't know any of their, I just knew that song. And then I talked my parents into getting me that cassette for a soundtrack to Heavy Metal, the motion picture. And I watched that, or I'd listen. I didn't have any money, and my parents did not like my taste in music. So I didn't get new music very often. I listened to that cassette a lot. Plus it had some swearing on it, which my parents, very conservative people, they didn't like the swears. So, I had to be cautious with that. Then in 1982, MTV hit. And I still say, people give MTV or Much Music in Canada a bad rap, but they did play heavy metal. MTV is very heavily involved in heavy metal becoming the dominant form of rock from 1983 to 1988. Mm-hmm. And it was on MTV that I saw my second Ronnie James Dio song for Holy Diver. And I was like, I knew the voice. I didn't know who the people were. I didn't know the guy's name, but I heard the voice and went, that's the guy who's on this song that I love so much. And then I had to track that down. And that started the boulder rolling down the hill, or I should say the snowball rolling down the hill. It depends on, if you're a cold weather person, it's a snowball. If you're a warm weather person, it's just an avalanche of rocks and things. Hard rocks.
No one likes the cold. Those aren't people.
especially in Montana. It was just anyway.
I just want to highlight 2 comments here. Welcome Uncle Meat to the show. We will be talking about some of these albums. I guarantee it. And that's a heck of a list right there. And to Nathan, Diary of a Madman. Man, Ozzy.
Nathan's a good guy.
Ozzy figures into my story here as well. Now, I would like to introduce to you to the stage. Finally, we have Mr. Jax Russell. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. How's
How are you doing?
Doing well. Can everybody hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Jax,
Perfect,
I'm just going to tell my next chapter of the story. Then we will go back to you, and we'll get you caught up with the first 2 questions, because the next chapter is kind of short relative to the third question. Okay. So, and just for spoilers, the third question, Johnny Metal kind of edged into that, but it was like, what were some of your first metal albums in your collection? Oops. But the second question is, was there a turning point when you got into metal? And I alluded to December 26th, 1984. In Canada, we call it Boxing Day. It's the day after Christmas. It's the day that your friends come over and they bring over their Christmas presents and you show them what you got. There was no socializing on Christmas Day. No. That was a family day. Boxing Day. That was the day that you got together with your friends. So first thing in the morning, my best friend Bob comes over. He brought a cassette with him. I had a new Atari game. It was called Snoopy versus the Red Baron, and it was really addictive. Like you could just play that thing all morning.
Well-
So we plugged in that video game.
What? That exists?
Yes, I will tell you more about this for sure. But Bob Shipper, my best buddy, brought over a cassette that he had got for Christmas. And it's the kind of thing where, you know, who knows where that original cassette is today, but here's the album right here. Masters of Metal Volume 2. And we put that on and played side 1. Track 1, side 1. Run to the
Nice.
Hills. Now, something about the alchemy of mixing that high-flying video game and this adrenalized rock and roll that I'd never heard before in my life. Something combined in my brain, in my blood, in my system. And I just listened to that song on repeat. And I felt like I was playing the video game better. Like my reflexes were sharper. Like I was more aggressive when I was playing Run to the Hills. Here's the track listing on the album. This is the entire track listing to what Bob Shipper and I listened to that day. Run to the Hills, Iron Maiden. Heavy Metal Love, Helix. Never Surrender, Triumph. Metal on Metal, Anvil. Balls to the Wall, Accept. You're Not the One, Urgent. Now that's one that I don't remember at all. Come On, Feel the Noise, Quiet Riot. You Got Another Thing Coming, Judas Priest. Limelight by Rush. Shake It Up by Lee Aaron. Hey Operator by Coney Hatch. The very, very memorable Thunder and Rock by Fist, which had this killer sax thing going on. And All Right Now by Santers. But we kept coming back to various songs because, you know, kids, we don't listen to albums. We know, let's play that song again. So Run to the Hills got the most play. Heavy Metal Love by Helix. Balls to the Wall, I was obsessed with for several months because I thought it was hilarious. You Got Another Thing Coming. These are the songs that were kind of like the catalysts for the change. And that was the day that it wasn't just casual anymore. Heavy metal music wasn't just, you know, something that I listened to because other kids listened to music as well. It became the passion. And the next thing that happened in Canada, as Reed actually mentioned, we had a little channel called Much Music. And had this little clip lined up that I was going to play. They had a show. It was every Monday and Thursday. I think it started out every Thursday, but it ended up being twice a week by the late 80s because it was so popular. It was a little show called the Pepsi Power Hour, although back then it was just called the Power Hour. It was hosted by one John Roberts, who currently works for Fox News in the United States. But back then he rocked the long hair and he was a metal guy. His favorite band was Venom. And he introduced me to all these bands that we've been talking about. Van Halen, Ozzy Osbourne. But I just want to run for you a real quick clip. This is the Pepsi Power Hour intro that I grew up with. And then we'll go to Jex. So here's a 2-minute clip.
24 hours a day, coast to coast in stereo. We are Much Music, the nation's music station. A day in stereo. This is the nation's music station, Much Music. feelings of love.
There you go. That really brings me back to those Monday afternoons after school, rushing to the VCR to hit the record button.
And I
Man.
tell you what, playing air drums with Dave Lombardo is a workout.
I
That was-
believe you.
That was a much better introduction than the metal show used to get on MTV. They just
Oh.
had like a 10-second promo.
Was that the Headbangers Ball?
Yeah, Headbangers Ball.
That's what I was gonna ask, because I used to watch that when they brought it back.
I think Jax would agree with me that we, although you're a bit younger and you weren't there for the glory years, but Much Music was pretty darn good.
Yeah, in their heyday, yes. Yeah. I
So,
enjoyed it a
Jax,
lot.
we've already covered the first 2 rounds. We have 1 round left to go, but we'll get you caught up. The first 2 questions were, what were you listening to before you decided that heavy metal was your thing? And then the second question is, was there a specific band, album, song that was your turning point where you said, this is my thing? So it's a 2-parter for you.
Okay. So yeah, question number 1, what was I listening to? I was a pretty timid kid, right? So, and I wasn't surrounded by heavy metal. I wasn't exposed to it. Like, none of my friends listened to it or my family. So no metal. I just listened to whatever I had access to as a kid, right? Which was my dad's cassette collection at the time. He had a drawer full of like cassettes. Most of them were like ones that he made himself, like mixtapes that he had made from like people's LPs and stuff. So, you know, my dad listened to a lot of like more like oldies stuff. You know, he had like some Buddy Holly in there. There was some Beatles, some Stones. So I listened to a lot of that.
Elvis? We've seen a lot of Elvis. Roger
Yeah.
had a ton of Elvis at the top of the show.
Is that right? Well, yeah, so did my dad. A lot of Elvis. Kind of an eclectic drawer. He had like that oldies, but all of a sudden you'd run into like some Pat Benatar or some Cheap Trick. So, you know, I had fun going through those tapes. So that's what I listened to mostly. And then as I got older, you know, a lot of stuff I'd hear in movies, you know, so I got into like the 80s pop, the new wave. But by the time I was a teenager in the early 2000s, I got into like the Blink 182, the Sum 41. That's what was on Much Music, you know, the pop punk bands, you know, and I was all into it. Now you wouldn't find me listening to them, you know, like
Hey, I'm going to see Blink in the summer, and it's way too much money.
and that's fine. I'm speaking personally. Me, I couldn't do it anymore, and if I did, it would just be for nostalgia, you know. But it's just not my thing anymore. But you know, we all go through phases like that. Actually, I skipped something. Before that, when I was like 14, 15, my dad joined Columbia House. So he was getting those penny CDs, right? So,
Right.
And I think I listened to those more than he did. It was stuff like the Beach Boys' greatest hits. I was really into that. But one that I couldn't get enough of was the Mamas and the Papas' greatest hits. I was in 10th grade listening to that, and like nobody in 10th grade, no 15-year-olds in the year 2000 were into the Mamas and Papas. So it just goes to show you what not a cool kid I was. But hey, I was just listening to what I liked, right? I liked it, so I'm like, hey, whatever. And then the pop punk happened, and then I started discovering like the mainstream, the classic punk bands, Ramones, Clash, Sex Pistols, which I still listen to those. I still like those very much. And so before metal came along, it was a kind of a weird eclectic mix,
A potpourri
kinds of
of music, so to speak.
yeah, potpourri, yeah. So it was just kind of an uphill. I didn't know what was coming, but it was there waiting for me.
It was coming though. So
Yeah.
one day, young Jex is hanging around and open to new sounds in his ears. And what was the turning point? What was the tipping point?
So you know, I knew about heavy metal. Like I'd see the T-shirts at school. I see people with like Pantera and you know Iron Maiden. So I knew of them. And actually, in my friend's garage, my buddy Matt Couture, who was like my best friend in high school, I would bike over to his house and we'd just hang around his garage talking. And he'd just go through his dad's tapes and play whatever was there. And that's where I heard like Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train for the first time, and Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. But that wasn't yet. That wasn't like the turning point. But I'm like, hey, this is pretty good, but not enough to make me, go out of my way and seek these bands out. But at the real turning point, I think, happened in the summer of 2004. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon. I'm hanging out at my parents' house on their computer. I was on MSN Messenger, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah.
And,
No, it was ICQ that went, uh-oh.
Yeah, I never used that one, but I was all about
I
MSN Messenger.
used that. ICQ is terrible. Oh.
Anyway, so my sister's online, and I start talking because there was a distance. She was in Quebec, in Montreal. I was in Bathurst, New Brunswick. So there's quite a big distance. So it was nice talking to her, and she was just telling me that her and her boyfriend were cleaning, and her boyfriend was getting her to send me MP3s of what they were listening to, the music they were listening to while cleaning. And one song was "Cowboys from Hell," the title track, Pantera, my first Pantera song. I'm like, oh, what's this? I click on it, and then just how it kind of leads in. I was like, whoa, that's wild. That's like I never heard.
Far beyond.
Did you get that in the actual show?
Yep, I did.
That's cool.
Well,
That's
I
cool,
know
John.
my birthday present next year.
Sorry, Jack.
So yeah, so my first Pantera song, and it just blew me away. And then I can't remember the order. This is 20 years ago. I can't remember which order, but another song they sent me was the opener, "Freewheel Burnin'," and I was just like that afternoon. I think I played those songs on repeat. I just, there you go. So that was like the turning point, that I'm like, hey, metal is pretty cool. And then as the years went by, I started picking albums up, bit by bit, and it just kind of gradually went into fandom. It was a long journey, but it all kind of took place.
Very cool. You know what? I'm just going to really quickly tell a quick story just before we go to Johnny Clauser's, because it just came to my mind, and I'm afraid of, as all these memories are coming to my mind, I'm afraid of losing them before I can talk. But I just had a memory, and it would have been shortly after buying, Bob Shipper got that Masters of Metal for Christmas. And he came over one day and he said, Mike, there's this band AC/DC, and the lead singers, they sound so similar, except Balls to the Wall and AC/DC. And we had this next door neighbor, George. He was 4 years older than me. And he was kind of like, the big kid on the block, but he was also like a real annoying. George isn't with us anymore, so I shouldn't say anything too bad about him, but he was always like, oh, I'm smarter than you guys about metal. He's 2 years older than Bob. He was 4 years older than me. And Bob's like, let's trick George. Let's play him this Accept song and see if he can guess who it is. So we had George come over on the back porch. It was cold outside. We had the outdoor tape deck with the batteries. Masters of Metal, puts it in, hits play, and he says, George, listen to this song. Who's this? And George is listening really intently. He's like, AC/DC. And Bob and I were both like, gotcha! It's not AC/DC. It's Accept. You don't know everything about. And he was so embarrassed. He was like, well, I'm used to listening to music on my own stereo, and the bass is too low and the treble is too. He made all these excuses, but that story just came to mind right now, and I wanted to share it. And it kind of dovetails in with my Masters of Metal. Anyway, Johnny Clauser, round 3 question is, what were your first metal albums in your collection?
Boy.
And memories associated with listening.
Okay, yeah, because I haven't been doing too much of that with a lot of this stuff. So, good God. Well, I mean, I mentioned this. Mm-hmm. So this was like one of my original 11 for a Penny deals with Columbia Record House. That was my first time I got into that.
Johnny, that comment.
Love that. I love it, Nathan. My fellow social buzzard. We need to get the band back together, Nathan. Just saying. So that was like one of my first, albums for a penny, for $1, for whatever. So kind of like, I guess I was a little bit of a follower too, because as I was learning about some of these bands, sometimes I'd see a random video on like MTV, and that's how I got introduced to Def Leppard. But I actually remember seeing Bringing on the Heartbreak first. Not the high and dry version, not the remixed version.
The live
stage version, right? So I remembered seeing that, and I thought, hey, this sounds pretty cool. And of course, then this would hit, and then I'm like, whoa, okay. So I kind of dug this. I mean, gosh, thinking about some of the stuff I was getting into back then, I was listening to a lot of this kind of stuff as the 80s progressed. Now some of this isn't total full on metal, but I'll tell you what, I defy you to say Machine Messiah from this album. Holy crap, what got into Yes for this. I remember getting this as a teenager because my sister liked Yes, and so I got more into it. And then I saw this in a cutout bin, and I picked it up, and I'm just like, this was before 90125 came out, and I was like, whoa! I wasn't expecting that from Yes. I still love this album. I think it's a great album.
That's actually the only Yes that I own is Drama.
I can remember hearing this on the radio. I heard Don't Tell Me You Love Me, and I'm thinking, what is that coming from the guitars? So I was like, whoa. So obviously this was in that same 11 for a Penny deal with Priest. Well, I still have this is my original copy of that. I don't have the Priest one anymore.
It looks like it's in pristine shape, Johnny.
And it's the Boardwalk label. I don't know if you can see. There's the Boardwalk label. So it's the Boardwalk label. So it's not the MCA reissue. But then as the 80s would go along, then I would be introduced to Iron Maiden. I would be introduced. I had a friend that dubbed me both. He had Number of the Beast on one side and Peace of Mind on the other. So that's where I first started learning about Maiden. Of course, I was at a friend's house with my brother one night, and Maiden just happened to be playing in town down the road at this outdoor venue we had called the Fairgrounds, and it was during the Peace of Mind tour. Now, there's a very famous story that comes out of the piece that night in Allentown, Pennsylvania, on the Peace of Mind tour, because after the show, that's when Mission from Ari got recorded.
Which I have. Yes, I know.
Yes.
I know.
So there you go. So I was actually in Allentown, Pennsylvania the night that I didn't see the concert, but I heard it. I heard it from my brother's friend's house. But yeah, so I wouldn't see Maiden until 85, with Accept opening on the Metal Heart tour. And but I now have to talk about a night that will always be in my memory for the rest of my life. And that is January, I believe it was 25th, 1985, 25th, 26th, something like that. And my friends, Mike and Dave and I, we were supposed to go see Iron Maiden in concert. And Twisted Sister was the opening act. However, Shunti, how are you, girl? Good to see you. Unfortunately, Maiden had a few gigs canceled around that time because they all got sick with the flu. A couple of gigs in Radio City Music Hall and a couple of other gigs. And so our gig was one of the ones that got postponed and was rescheduled to June. So my buddies, we decided to still get together and we go out to the mall. And I've told this story a few times, but I don't think your viewers have heard me tell this story. So we all decided we wanted to get something. The only thing we really knew by Twisted Sister at that point was Stay Hungry. So my buddy, Mike, he decides he's going to pick up this little gem on cassette. And my friend Dave, yeah, well,
I'm really great
my
here.
friend, that's
One
okay.
more try. Here we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes.
Under the blade.
And this is I just recently picked this version up again, but because I had this a long time ago. But anyway, yes. On the Secret Records version, which is the version of Under the Blade to get, my friend Dave got You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And I'm like, well, I need to get something. I want give me something fresh. So my friend Dave is like, yeah, I read about this band in Circus. I think you might like them.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Oh man, Ed Rogers got it too. So there you go. So
I'm just surprised I have props still.
I'm proud of you, Roger.
So that night, so we get home, and I also got Kiss Analyzed that night too. And
I can
so
show that.
so we get to my friend Dave's house, and then we all take turns. We start with Under the Blade because that was first. That was the first album, and we're just like, what the heck? Twisted Sister was like this? Who knew? We didn't. And then we go to You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. We're like, whoa, this is really good. This kicks in. Game changer. Totally changed me. Totally changed my life. As soon as that drum beat kicks off for I Want to Be Somebody, I was hooked. I was like, this is my band right here. Just like Reed said, Dio's my guy. Blackie was mine. That's when I realized Blackie was my guy. And we're starting to listen through some of the songs, and it's just like, yeah, I dig this. There's something fierce. There's something dangerous about this. I like this. So that's where it really got changed. Now, as time would go along, I would get introduced to another little band out of California, and they were a little bit more on the speedier, thrashier, faster side. And the album that I had heard was it was half live, half studio. At least this version of it was. But then their second full-length album would come out. And I'm like, whoa, hello, folks. This was also another game changer because this album really hooked me into Slayer. I got really big time into this. But then to combat that, yeah, then I was also introduced to another band out of California. And at that point, they had us one album where they're all sitting on a tank with machine guns. But then this second album they would come out with.
Oh,
So there you go.
Uncensored cover. Nice.
there it is.
So yeah, and this is still my original version that I got back in the day. Obviously, Slayer is not, but yeah. So I still have those to me. So I have these memories. I love Stryper, but I love Slayer too. I was getting into Metallica, so I started to learn. I started understanding what Ride the Lightning was all about.
Mhm.
I was introduced to Raven. I was introduced to what's another band I was introduced to?
Anthrax.
Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden was another one I was introduced to. Murderous Metal Roadshow. So I would get introduced to a lot of these kind of off the wall bands, not so much your mainstream stuff. I don't think I heard Anthrax. I don't remember when I first heard Anthrax. It probably wasn't until about Indians Among the Living. I don't think I'd heard Spreading the Disease or anything before that. I heard about Megadeth. I would eventually get Peace Sells, which would still be probably my favorite Megadeth album. But yeah, the whole mid '80s when like stuff I was getting into my collection, it just exploded. I just started, if I had money, I just was buying stuff. If it was in metal, I just got it. Once I don't have a copy of it handy, but a band that I remember one album that I just saw the cover and I was like, okay, yeah, that I'll take that. Sickened the person at Camelot Music, but I still took it. Malaya Rage, Kill to Survive. Love that. love that album. To this day, I still love that album. I just don't have it handy to show off. But yeah, so there's the 80s, the mid 80s just exploded for me because I was just a little bit, the potpourri that you referenced to with Jax, well, that was like me. I was just a little bit of everything that I could just get my hands on. And then basically I was just making a lot of mixtapes. So I may not know all of the full albums, but if certain songs I gravitated to, those were the ones I went to. So
Awesome.
Nice.
And I'll just mention that because I don't have the album, but Wasp was also one of my formative years bands. They got a lot of play. I Want to Be Somebody was on Much Music a lot. And it was sort of like the first band that my sister and I really kind of divided on. Before then, we were kind of like all into the same music, but Wasp divided us. She did not like the Drinking the Blood from the Skull. That was it. Metal Roger, what were your first albums? You mentioned Slipknot. What else were you buying back then in the early 2000s?
Well, there used to be a music store where I used to live, so I'd go there at every lunch hour. Excuse me. And this place doesn't exist anymore because, economy. Anyway.
A lot of those old record stores don't exist anymore.
Yeah, it was beside a great ice cream store. I miss that ice cream store.
Oh.
Anyway, there was a band called Static X.
Yes, I you know what? I've only recently kind of been listening to Static X.
And that CD cover of Wisconsin Death Trap kind of drew me in, and I was like, what the hell is this? And then I played it, and I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And recently, I finally got to see them live, even though the singer is dead, so it's kind of like the Pantera tribute. But also that day, believe it or not, I bought a CD from them that was that all-female Canadian band called Kitty. And I have no idea why I was into that. Actually, I do. It's because they were all females, and I thought it was pretty crazy that that woman could scream like that.
And the drummer is incredible.
Yeah, that band was very underrated.
They're back together now.
Yeah, I haven't listened to her song yet, but. And to answer your one question, Tony Hawk was around the same time as I got into Slipknot. But that's punk music, and there's barely any metal on there except for Anthrax. And that's how I discovered Anthrax.
And that takes us
Always
full
the
circle.
punkiest of the thrash bands.
Yes. And Anthrax takes us full circle because that's where I met you, was on my music corner when we did the Anthrax Armored Saint episode, which was hella fun. Excuse me. There was one other, Static X. I just want to comment real quick. I really like what they're doing with the new singer. I really like how he looks like a robot. It's an incredible costume. It really looks incredible. They don't in any way pretend that he is Wayne Static. He comes out and he says, this is a tribute to Wayne. We're all friends of Wayne. And I love what they're doing.
Yeah, they say he's AI.
He's AI.
Cool.
In reality, they say it's I can't remember his name. It's the lead singer of another band that was very close. Dope. Yeah, it's Edsel Dope is really the lead singer, is what they say. But that's a whole other show. Reed, what were your first records that you bought? Your heavy metal records that you remember loving?
So this is kind of a tricky one because go back to earlier my comment that I didn't have a lot of money and my parents didn't like my taste in music, and I was not a rebellious kid who was going to force my parents to listen to music that they didn't like. So what I did for about 2 years, from 81 to 83, well, not 81 because MTV didn't hit until 82, but as soon as we got MTV, I was glued to MTV. When I got home from school, we had 2 televisions, one in the front room, one in the den. The den was a 12-inch black and white TV. It didn't matter. I would lock myself in the den and I would turn on MTV and I would watch MTV until it was time to go to bed. And I would do that every day. And it didn't matter who was on, I loved it. And then this does wrap into albums eventually. Sometimes I could convince my parents to get me a CD, one of which, because they got me a portable cassette player. At the time when they first came out, people called them ghetto boxes.
Yeah.
We figured out that was not not an inclusive and sensitive term. So now or actually ghetto blasters. Sorry. Now
That's what we call
they
them
changed
now.
it to boom boxes. But the point is, it had a headphone output. The Sony Walkman wasn't even on the market yet, so there was no portable CD player. But they got me a small one. My dad was a cheap man. Love him. But if Dad was going to buy something, he was an early adopter, and then he would buy the cheapest version of whatever it was. So he would have to buy 2 more to get something that was worth owning, and never really figured out that many had spent 3 times the money and just getting something good the first time, right? So they got me this little boombox with a headphone output. And once that happened, I crawled into my headphones and didn't come out until about 1988. But I didn't have much in the way of albums. I talked them into getting me Scorpions' Love at First Sting. That one wasn't too expensive for them. On a road trip at a truck stop, I got Queen's Greatest Hits, actually, and listened to it. Although by this point, they were not a heavy metal band other than their first couple of albums. But I made some friends in the 8th grade that had 2 very important things. I had a friend who had an older brother who, it turned out, loved heavy metal. And I discovered he had all of the albums that I wanted to listen to. Now, he was smart because he knows I was just a dumb kid. If he'd given me those albums, I'd have kept them. But he would loan them to me for like a day. Here, you can borrow this overnight. And then the next day he'd be like, give it back or I break your kneecaps. So I would get to listen to stuff. And then I found out that a kid that I had known but hadn't become friends with yet, I made friends with a guy who owned a massive stereo system. His dad this was a small town. His dad had an auto parts store. It was one of the most thriving businesses in this little town. And he had a job working in the stock room, and he took all of his money and bought stereo equipment. And he had very understanding parents. He was a huge Judas Priest fan. So he exposed me to Judas Priest. I was getting most of my heavy metal exposure from MTV, but he had a dual tape deck. So now I could take my other friend's older brother's tapes that he would loan me for one night, and my other friend with the dual tape deck would copy off a cassette for me. Now,
Perfect.
Kids, that's wrong. Don't steal music. At the time, I did not even think about that as a factor. I think most people probably don't. It was wrong, but I did it hundreds and hundreds of times. So I got his entire thing. And of course, the first 2 albums, Holy Diver and Mob Rules. And I would just play that cassette for hours and hours and hours. And what I never realized is that my friend with the tape deck never paid attention to which one was side 1 and which one was side 2. He just took it, popped it in the cassette, rewound it. And so I had those albums with side 2 first on my cassette. And when I finally was able to get them proper copies, and it would start with the wrong song, and it just threw me for years. But so those were huge. And then my friend with the double cassette deck, he started buying everything. If it looked mildly rock or heavy metal, he bought everything. I still remember when he bought Molly Hatchet because it had those awesome Frank Frazetta covers. And we thought it was going to be the heaviest thing on the planet. You put it in and it's just like middle of the road Southern rock. Well, wasn't expecting that. But I have described this on some other things. He was a guy who wanted to piss off his parents. So he got like Black Sabbath Born Again. And we'd get into his room was in the basement, and he'd crank that stupid stereo up, and he had a huge, I mean, it was a big amplifier and big speakers and a subwoofer, and it would rattle that room. And that album, when they go into Disturbing the Priest, it has Stonehenge, blah, the whole room is rattling. And then Ian Gillan screams. That was just one of the scariest things I had ever heard on album at that time. It was so amazingly impactful. But he would get everything. We would hear one song on MTV, and he'd be like, I got to go buy that. Helix Heavy Metal Love video comes out. I got to buy that album. Loudness, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. Oh, I got to go buy that album. Rat, got to buy that album. Iron Maiden, got to buy that album. Of course, he already owned all the Judas Priest stuff. We used to have to drive 2 hours to get to some place that sold records. He had a car and I didn't. So he would go, and plus he had a job and I didn't. So he would go 2.5 hours away and buy music and bring it back, and he'd copy it. And that was when I started to kind of differentiate, you know what, I like this, I don't like this so much, and started more developing my taste. So 2 other things that happened. One, in 1983, as I was I'm watching my MTV. And I would watch MTV. I didn't care if it was on MTV. I didn't care if it was heavy metal or not. When I'm listening to my cassettes, it was heavy metal. So if it's going, if it's my headphones, it's heavy metal. But if it's going into my eyes, I don't care. Any music. And I'm watching this video one time, and it's 1983, so the budgets for videos hadn't gone through the roof yet. It's this super cheesy Mad Max ripoff, post-apocalyptic. There's like people around a trash can fire, and it starts in, and I'm like, this is a pretty badass riff, man. And then the guys walk onto camera, and I go, that's Kiss without makeup. Oh my gosh, it's Kiss without makeup. And I had not listened to Kiss since 1979. I got to see Kiss in concert on the Dynasty tour, and I went, they'll never be this good again, and I just stopped listening to them. So I had no idea they had put out any albums in the meantime, but I was like, Lick It Up. And a friend of mine had that album, and he's like, yeah, I've got it. It sucks. And I was like, oh, well, then you won't mind letting me have that album. There may have been some scamming involved as well. I'm a little uncomfortable going down that road. But anyway, I somehow wound up with this album. And that reignited my love for Kiss. And I love 80s Kiss. I love heavy metal Kiss. Lick It Up, Animalize, Asylum. Those are great albums. And Creatures of the Night I eventually got as well. But I actually got that after the other 3. And the other weird thing in my high school, this was one of those strange cultural things. My peers only liked whatever was the new thing. And they only liked it as long as it was the new thing. So, like, Duran Duran's Hungry Like the Wolf came out. I knew 20 kids. Now, my high school was not huge. It was actually fairly large for Montana. There were like 100 kids in my graduating class. And I knew like 20 kids who bought Hungry Like the Wolf. They never bought another Duran Duran album. They just bought that one. They bought David Bowie, Let's Dance. Never bought another David Bowie album. They bought Rat Out of the Cellar. Never bought another Rat album. So my friend who had bought Lick It Up, he didn't get Animalize. But I knew other kids. Animalize was probably the most popular Kiss album among my high school. But no one who'd bought that bought Asylum. And they hadn't bought Lick It Up. They just bought Animalize. So people would buy this one album and then they'd move on, and I'd find somebody and go, well, if you're not listening to that, maybe you'd like to pass that on to somebody else. So I acquired a bunch of music that way, or having my friend tape it off, and my other friend who had an older brother who liked heavy metal. But I also remember, this is a funny story because I'm a little bit OCD. I think a lot of us who are still music fans are.
Yeah. And
I saw the video for The Last in Line. Now, of course, Ronnie's my guy, right? And that video was so effing cool, right? The guy in the elevator to hell, and it's just, I was like, and I saw it one time, and they never played it again. at least when I was watching. I think they probably played it at like 2 a.m. or something. And I kept waiting for that song and waiting for that song. And then I was able to get a copy of that album. And Mike, you kind of mentioned this earlier. I got that album and I played the song, The Last in Line, over and over and over and over. And I remember one day I was in band. I used to play the saxophone. We were on a band trip and I was playing The Last in Line, and somebody asked me about another song on the album. And I went, I don't know. I've never listened to the rest of it. I just heard this one song. So, but he's like, what? Well, you're on a bus and we're not getting off for 3 hours. Why don't you play the rest of the album? So I did. And I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. I should listen to the rest of it.
That's funny.
And Def Leppard, also huge. I loved Pyromania. I think High and Dry is a vastly overrated album. I think it's basically an AC/DC tribute album. I don't understand the love that people have for that album. Every freaking song on it's in the key of A. All of the tempos are within 10 BPM of each other. It's the most monotonous hard rock album that Def Leppard ever put out. And everybody's like, oh, it's the greatest album they ever put out. And I'm like, no. That album had no variety. It had no creativity. Pyromania is where everything that became Def Leppard exists. That is their ne plus ultra to me.
But I think there was a hunger on High and Dry. To me, there's a hunger on High and Dry that I appreciate, in a rawness. That's why I like High and Dry so much. But I mean, I like Pyromania too. But
again, that's the AC/DC-ness of it. That and Pete Willis, because they were much more of just a straight up hard rock band at that point. But you know what? There were a lot of straight up hard rock bands. And it wasn't until Pyromania that they really developed an identity that was absolutely different.
I would agree with Reed. Yeah.
You know, it's funny, Reed. I'll mention this about Dio. You know what attracted me about Dio? Vivian.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Vivian drew me to Dio, not Dio himself. Because I was interested in guitar. I was interested in Vivian because Vivian was just, what is that? You know, and that's what I was probably drawn more to Vivian more than Dio himself. Whoops. Lost Jax there for a second.
The guitar solo on Stand Up and Shout is a real eye opener.
Oh yeah.
You know, you guys have been mentioning, we've talked about so many of these seminal metal bands from that period of time. You know, there's one band that I was surrounded by at that age that hasn't come up yet, and I'm kind of surprised, but they're not metal necessarily, but metalheads listen to ZZ Top, and they were certainly in my wheelhouse. You know, we talked about how we were all influenced by the taste of Friends, and I grew up in a neighborhood where I was basically the youngest boy, and all the other kids were 1, 2, 3, 4 years older, and they had ZZ Top, and they had Van Halen, and they had AC/DC, Iron Maiden. And like those, it seems like there's this core group. And I didn't know that Dio was the same guy that was in the Black Sabbath video for Neon Nights. I remember distinctly sitting in my basement with my next door neighbor, George, who we'll hear about again. And I remember saying to him, does Black Sabbath have anything to do with Ronnie James Dio as we're watching these music videos? He's like, yeah, Dio sang for Black Sabbath. And then when I realized that there was this other band called Deep Purple, and their singer was also in Black Sabbath, and Ozzy originated in, like, my mind just started blowing. And we talk about OCD and stuff. This is like the stuff that I love, like these little connections, these little threads connecting bands together. And I can remember, do you remember those little things that you used to make out of paper and you'd fold them and you'd do this? And I remember making a quiz one, a heavy metal quiz one. And it's like, what does Ozzy, Ronnie James Dio, and the singer from Deep Purple have in common? They were all in Black Sabbath. You know, I remember doing this. Anyway.
I remember when Perfect Strangers came out, I didn't understand why people were making a big deal of that, because I only knew 2 Deep Purple songs, the ones they played at skating rinks when I was a kid. And so that was Woman from Tokyo and Smoke on the Water.
Of course,
and I liked those, but yeah, whatever. And so I had heard Born Again. Now, Born Again, of course, Ian makes that just before he goes and makes Perfect Strangers. And my friend Jeff got Perfect Strangers and came. He was so excited, and he put it on and cranked it up. And I was like, it's old person's music. And I did not get into Deep Purple for probably another 10 years after that. When I was a kid, I was like, nope, that's the previous generation's music. I don't care.
I felt the same
I want
way.
new stuff.
When I was that age, I felt the same way. Yeah.
Well, to add to the Purple story, so I was given Fireball. Okay.
Good album.
And it's funny. There's one song on there has stuck with me all these years that I've listened to more than any other song off that album. Anyone's Daughter.
Oh yeah,
I knew it.
good.
I knew it.
That's so
It's so
funny.
different.
Don't ask me why.
It's
But
good.
that one stuck with me. But I just want to throw one more thing before we go, because I know we need to get to the next one. But I want to throw another metal band out that you saw during the time on MTV. Reed, I want to know if you caught this band on there. But because this actually they played this during the regular rotation. You remember Grim Reaper, See You in Hell?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh
my friend
gosh,
had Grim Reaper.
Yeah, that was a
In-
great song.
On Much Music, we only ever saw one video, which was Fear No Evil. And we thought it was cool. We loved videos where the band was on like an adventure. And there was Armored Saint, Can You Deliver, where that happened. They had to like get that sword and then go and jump in an SUV or something. There was
Motley Crue's
Queensryche,
Too Late
Queen
to
of the
Relate
Reich,
for
which
Love.
might have been Queen of the Reich might have been the cheesiest of them all. But we loved videos where the band was going on these Mad Max type adventures. We had Motley Crue, Too Young to Fall in Love,
is
which
what
was
I
a
meant to say.
direct ripoff of All Hell's
was
Breaking Loose,
awful.
or concurrent to. Anyway, I've taken up enough time. Jex Russell, what were some of your first metal albums?
Let's see. I'm not and Reed is a tough act to follow, man. He's not quite the storyteller. And
Well, thank you.
I hope you could all see me okay. I have tendency to freeze, so apologies. The internet's not the greatest here. So what? It's hard to remember the first, but the first record I remember buying is 2000. That's summer 2004. That's when my sister's boyfriend sent me the Pantera and the Judas Priest, and then shortly after, the fall of 2004, I got a record player for my birthday. So I started buying
Really?
records.
You got a
Yeah.
record player in 2004.
Yeah,
You
which
were like
wasn't.
20 years ahead of the game.
I know. I wanted one. I was seeing records for sale at the local farmers market, and I'm like, I want a record player. So my parents got me one from the Sears catalog, and one of the first records I bought, Reed mentioned it earlier when I first signed on, Heavy Metal, the soundtrack to the movie.
All right.
Which is not, despite the title, it's not all heavy metal on there, but there's some songs like he mentioned the Mob Rules, and that was like, which
That was
funny
also
story
a double
about
album
that.
too. Was it not a double
What?
album on record? It was a double album.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 2 records. Yes. And when I first heard, I got a funny story when I first heard Mob Rules. It kind of goes with what you were saying, Mike. Like, does Dio have anything to do with Black Sabbath? Because my knowledge of Black Sabbath was minimal at this point. I've heard some songs. I knew Iron Man. I knew Paranoid. The hits. So when I finally heard Mob Rules, like, geez, Louise, Ozzy sounds different here. What is going on? I didn't know. I didn't know it was a different guy. I didn't hear about Dio until shortly after. But I was just like, this sounds off. But you gotta start somewhere. And another great song that on that one that nobody talks about enough is Trust, the French band.
Oh
Nico
yeah, I
McBrain
love
was
that
in
song.
Trust very briefly.
Yep.
Nico McBrain was in that band.
Oh, I
From
didn't even
Iron
know
Maiden.
that. But
Yeah.
they have a song prefabricated on there, which Trust they would record their songs in English and in French. So if you go on Spotify, you could listen to that song in French. It's wild because I'm so used to hearing it on the heavy metal record. But anyway, so that was an early one I remember buying, and then shortly after, in the summer 2005, I would go to yard sales every Saturday morning with my girlfriend at the time. And this is at a time when people were just dumping their cassettes. People were just not listening to cassettes anymore. They were just selling them, and you could get them for dirt cheap. I was buying them for like $0.25 a piece.
Yeah.
And I didn't grab them because my cassettes are in the closet where my children are sleeping right now. But I'll show my CD copies of cassettes that I bought.
Wait,
Oh,
you make
Bark
your
of the
children
Moon.
sleep in the closet? You shouldn't do that.
It's a very small house, Reed.
Yeah. No, correction. The closet of the room.
And one of his kids' name is Harry. So no, just kidding.
So yeah, one of the first cassettes I bought was Bark of the Moon, and I also had Ultimate Sin. I found those at the same table.
Actually, hold that up one more time. Because hang on, I've got this one
Yeah.
here.
Oh, cool.
Ooh, the single.
A single.
Yeah.
Very nice. And this one got mentioned briefly. Stay Hungry.
Yeah.
And I think this was part of that lot too. I bought a cassette Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. And what's cool about the cassette, the Canadian copy,
That's
at the time,
right.
'cause they had rushed them out because Motley Crue was going to play, I forget, I think it was Edmonton, and they needed to rush out the cassettes onto the shelves. So while it has the Electra packaging, the cassette, it's actually the leather mix that you're listening
With-
to.
Stick to your guns. Yep.
In the
Uh,
70s.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly.
That's the copy I
And-
had. That's the
Yeah.
copy I had.
And there's that intro to the title track, Too Fast for Love.
When you're young and crazy, life goes on.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to listen to any other version now. Those are some early ones.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Jax, but I had that. I didn't know anything about it until like way later, and then it was starting to wear out, and I bought a replacement from Columbia House, and it was a different mix. And I couldn't listen to it.
Right. Well, that's why I'm glad. Like I got this, it's the Crucial Crew CD, and you get bonus tracks. You get to Stick to Your Guns, which I'm happy, and you have that extended.
Sorry.
Oh, hello, Mike. How do you
Wrong.
do?
Sorry, wrong button. Here we go. There we go.
Yeah. So if you get this one, you get the bonus tracks,
Wow.
and you have that extended title track with the intro. So, it's like the closest thing.
Jax, that's actually the closest thing is if you buy the Crucial Crew. No, not the Crucial Crew. Music to Crash Your Car to Volume 1. It includes
Right.
both mixes on one disc.
That's
Which is-
true. I forgot about that.
And you know what's crazy about that is that you can tell that the CD is a vinyl rip. You can hear the pops and the ticks.
Which I'm all for that. I like that.
Yeah, me too.
I like the,
Me too.
I like the little pops.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway,
yeah,
I'm sorry I
and
keep
then-
interrupting.
Oh, it's okay. I'll wrap up soon. Then shortly after that, I was hearing all about Iron Maiden. People talk about Iron Maiden, and I had only heard the Number of the Beast in my buddy Matt's garage, like I mentioned earlier. And I'm like, one day, it's the fall of 2005. I'm gonna go to our local music store, which was called CD Plus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna buy a Maiden CD. I didn't know what. I had no knowledge of Maiden other than that one song. But I went to their section, and they had a huge Maiden section. It was all like the enhanced CDs, the 1998 versions.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do I buy? Like, I have no reference other than that one song. So I'm gonna get the one. I got Number of the Beast. And the mall was about an hour walk back to my parents' house. But I had my Discman on me. I popped it in the Discman, walked home, listened to Number of the Beast for the first time. What a great walk that was. Like, it just, everything, like from the opening, Invaders, then Children of the Damned. And then when The Prisoner came on, I didn't know what it was, but that clip, like, I am not a number, I'm a free man. I was like, this is incredible. Yeah, the new number 2. Like,
Who is
like,
number
this
1? Patrick McGowan from the TV show.
Yes, exactly. I found that out. Oh, there it is. I have it on vinyl also. I found that was one of my best finds at a record show 10 years ago. $7 for Number of the Beast.
Yeah, this is that 40th anniversary version with Beast over Hammersmith.
Very nice.
Oh, that's cool too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then as time progressed, I bought more and more. Ooh, single.
Beautiful.
Run to the Hills. Very nice.
And sometimes, and I guess this is where I kind of tell my story and I wrap up. Johnny Metal just reminded me of something that I'd completely forgotten. We would go to the local, I guess you call it a rock shop. It was in the mall. It was in a corner of the mall, and they had T-shirts and patches for your jacket, and they would sell metal studs in a little container. You could buy metal studs, and we collected buttons, right? And I've posted pictures of my buttons before, but I remember we would take a look at those Maiden ones. We'd be like, I've never seen that art before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. And a lot of them came from singles, as Johnny Metal just showed. A lot of them came from tour posters. And there were a lot of weird ones, like the Phantom of the Opera Eddie, where he's playing the organ. We're like, what is that? And it was like a big mystery. And I believe I can speak for all of my childhood friends when I say the Aces High Eddie was our favorite. It was so cool. So
Derek Riggs is like
Riggs.
the hardest working artist in heavy metal, like, because not only did he do the albums, he did all of the singles,
and posters,
everything.
Yeah,
Posters,
and
t-shirts. Like,
yeah.
I don't
Crazy.
I don't want to crap on the guy who does their current album covers, but he's no Riggs.
I can't remember who it is.
I don't either.
I know they were
mean, like-
using Mark Wilkinson for a while, and they used Melvin Grant for a while, but I can't remember who it is now.
Yeah.
It's not like
Well,
you
I
say,
don't
it's
know
not-
why that relationship soured, but they lost something.
Oh, absolutely. They changed
Agreed.
on Fear of the Dark was the first one without Derek Riggs. And,
Yeah, and it had that weird pumpkin-headed Eddie, and
yeah, and it with completely different eyes instead of like the lightning eyes. It was these bulging red bug eyes. And anyway, I could go on and on and on about the weird tree Eddie. My story continues. In 1985, George Blaz, next door neighbor, massive Kiss fan, 4 years older than me, had an almost complete Kiss collection. He needed 2 records. He needed Hotter Than Hell, and he needed The Elder. And, you know, I would go over to his house and listen to these records, but I didn't own any yet until one fateful night in September of 1985, when I got a phone call from Ian Johnson, a schoolmate of mine. And he was desperate to acquire my Atari video game of Superman. And he said, I'll trade you some records, some Kiss records for Superman. And I still have, to this day, one of the Kiss records that he traded me that day. And I still listen to it. I still know every pop and tick. Oh, we're losing Jex again. He traded me this, and he traded me Hotter Than Hell. And I knew immediately that I would think, there's Roger.
Oh, nice.
I knew immediately I was going to flip Hotter Than Hell to George. I knew I literally had him by the balls. I knew it. I knew he would do anything to get Hotter Than Hell. So I went up to my bedroom, and on my crappy little record player that was probably similar to the one that Reed had when he was a kid, it was a Fisher Price. I played Hotter Than Hell from start to finish. And then I called George, called him up on the phone. I'll never forget. I was sitting in my parents' basement, called him up, and I said, George, do you still need the Kiss album Hotter Than Hell? And his voice kind of goes dead. And he goes, yes, why? I said, I have one. And he goes, I'll be right over. And he hung up. 2 minutes later, knocking on the door. Negotiations were heavy, but I got out of that deal. I traded my Hotter Than Hell for a Walkman, Black Sabbath Paranoid on cassette, Iron Maiden Flight of Icarus, 12-inch single. He recorded Hotter Than Hell for me on a cassette. And I got an Abbott and Costello Who's on First record, which I then gifted to my father for Christmas that year. So I thought I did very well. Now here's the catch. That Superman Atari game that I traded to Ian Johnson for the Kiss records in the first place, I've been since reminded that video game didn't actually belong to me. It was my sister's. And she still resents me to this day because we still have a working Atari 2600. So she still resents that to this day. But
That's impressive.
Anyway, I feel like it was worth it because look what happened. This changed my life. You know, 1985 was a very critical year in my life. It was the last year of grade school where I was a complete loner. Nobody liked me. I was going to start a new life at a new high school without any of those kids near me. And I was making a new identity for myself, and it was Kiss. There were really 4 bands initially. We talked about Wasp, there was Kiss, there was Iron Maiden, and there was Judas Priest. And it was shortly after that I received this on cassette. And this was actually too much for me. It was too heavy. It was too screamy. It was too aggressive, like the title track. Johnny Metal, go to his channel. He's covering all these albums. He's already done Screaming for Vengeance. I think you can understand, John, how this might be a step too far, given that I was listening to all these Kiss albums.
Oh, yeah.
And it took a while. I remember George. I remember saying, I don't like it. I will trade it to you. And I almost did. And I'm glad I didn't, because it started to click with me a few months later. When summer holidays hit, I remember really liking it. I preferred this. This was the last one in John's, well, at least the last consecutive one in John's series that he covered. And, you know, even this had stuff that was way too aggressive for me, but I love Freewheel Burning. And I love that part in the video where Rob Halford starts doing the rapid fire lyrics, which I'm not even going to attempt, but it's look before you leap, something, something, something.
Right.
And you know what's funny? I'm sorry, Reed?
I was just gonna say, hold up that photo or the cover again. Notice on the perspective of this, he's got the Gatling guns there on the side.
But they're going to hit his shoulder pad.
Yeah, they blow the arm off of the. I can't remember what that thing's called.
The Metallion.
The Metallion. I know that from watching My Music Corner.
I thought the Metallion was the bird on Screaming for Vengeance.
No.
Hellion, right?
Yeah, that's the Hellion.
That's
No,
the
the
Hellion.
the Metallion is because if you look on the back of yours, Mike, I think there's like a thing that
scroll,
says something. There's a no, I think there's
No,
like a little
there's-
Yeah, right here.
Oh, it's at
On
the
top.
top. It's at the top.
Yeah.
yeah,
The Metallion.
rising from darkness where hell hath no mercy, and the screams of vengeance echo on forever. Only those that keep the faith shall escape the wrath of the Metallion. So yeah, that thing was, that thing's called the Metallion. They said so.
Master
This
of
was
all
more
metal.
my speed. I remember Love Bites was on the charts at the time. It was on a show called The Top 10 at 10 on the Toronto radio station Q107. And I remember recording songs like Rat. Which one was it? It was the first single from Invasion of Your Privacy.
Lay it down.
Lay It Down. It was Lay It Down. I remember recording that on the radio. My friends would come over with their copy of Van Halen 1984 with the baby smoking the cigarette. And I knew parents wouldn't like that. But I distinctly remember sitting on the front porch. My buddy Bob had one of those tape decks like schools had. Like it was a mono tape deck and it came in like a little leather wrap. Do you remember those things? My buddy Bob was playing Van Halen 1984. My dad comes home from work. We're on the front patio and he stops and he says, "What's this you're listening to?" And Bob says, "It's Van Halen." My dad goes, "Van Halen? Sounds like the name of some tropical disease." And Bob Shipper's dad would he'd make similar cracks. But my buddy Bob and I, we would watch these music videos in my basement, and Judas Priest would come on, and my dad would walk into the basement and he goes, "What's wrong with that man? He's screaming. Is there something wrong with his pancreas?" But they supported us. Our parents supported us. Like you guys said, they weren't necessarily into our taste in music, but my mom never said no. Now, I found out years later that she was going into my bedroom and looking at the lyric sheets of these albums because it was the Satanic Panic, right?
Oh yeah.
And I went to a Catholic school, and I made the poor decision of wearing my Judas Priest t-shirt to school, and I got singled out, and I got reamed out by the teachers, and I never wore it again. And okay, there's this one really weird memory I have, and to this day, I couldn't tell you if it actually happened or if it was a dream. That's how weird it is. But I remember being in the schoolyard, and there was this van with two guys in it, and they were like anti-drug crusaders, and it was like an information van. Do you know what I'm talking about? And these guys would go from school to school and tell you not to do drugs. And I remember this van being there, and I remember the kids crowded around the van as these guys are talking about drugs. Don't do drugs, and heavy metal music leads to drugs. Does anybody here listen to heavy metal music? And I remember the kids pushing me to the front. And it's so surreal that I can't tell you if it actually happened to me or if it was a dream, but I think it did happen. And that was a real thing, man. Like there was so much stigma and prejudice. Yeah. And, I was bound and determined, though, that this was my thing. I didn't give a crap if the teachers approved or not. And I tried to work heavy metal music into my homework, art projects. I would draw guitar. I was starting to draw guitars instead of like candy canes or whatever they wanted us to draw. We had to do a speech every year. Did you guys have to do speeches where you had to memorize and talk for 2 or 3 minutes? I did mine on history. Teachers didn't like that too much, especially when I started talking about their second album, Hotter Than Hell. I remember the teachers' look on their faces. Oh my God. I guess I was a rebel. What else? What else do we have here?
If you were Catholic, then you were technically an iconoclast.
I suppose I was. I was a lapsed Catholic. Teachers did not approve of my church attendance record, which was none. See, what happened was, swear to God, Easter is coming. I can tell this story. What happened was we went to Easter service one Good Friday at church, and they had foot washing. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. John has. My dad had an aisle seat, and he is incapable of saying no to anybody. Someone walks up and says, "Sir, may I wash your feet?" It's a symbol of when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. And my dad, not being able to say no, said, "Sure." And sure enough, he took off his shoes and socks. They washed his feet. And he was like, "I'm so humiliated. we never went to church again. Never went to church again. True story. This album has come up already.
Oh,
Very early favorite of mine. Again, I didn't know these entanglements of all these different bands and that weird long-haired guy being the same guy in this other band called Deep Purple.
That
I
cover,
thought this was his original band. I thought that this was his, I didn't know.
that cover must be the worst cover.
A lot of people believe it
Oh.
is. A lot of people believe it is. But you can't deny that it jumps out at you. The colors do anyway.
Good point.
Sorry. But my friends would try to teach me, like students in a Jedi Master.
This is probably one of the worst album covers
Ooh.
right here.
Oh, yeah, I don't like that.
1986 Metal Blade, a band called
Yeah.
Predator with an album called Easy Prey. This probably gets the most flack of anything on Metal Blade. So
I had never seen that until your video recently, your Metal Blade video, and I was like, "Whoa,
No,
they let this happen!" Like,
Yeah,
I haven't
it's
seen that yet.
problematic.
I still have to see that.
You can't
sorry to interrupt.
about Glam Terra Metal Magic too.
Oh God,
well,
that's
some of those early Panteros were pretty bad.
the one with the cat holding the little sword with the tiny thin little neck on it is ridiculous.
I was like this close to buying that years ago just because it's such an abomination. Much
Yes.
like other things I own.
I'll just show one more record before I wrap up here. Bob Shipper, my best friend growing up, was he was the most influential person on me, and he loved Iron Maiden. So for his birthday, I bought him Peace of Mind on vinyl. And for some reason it was open. I don't know why it was open. It was a new copy, but it was open. And I didn't know he already had Peace of Mind. So this ended up becoming my first Maiden studio album right here. This very record right here has been so loved over the years. And the inner sleeve is like the record will pop through if I don't grip it well enough. Man. And I'm fortunate to still be in touch with my buddy Bob Shipper, and we really need to catch up. We haven't been able to do that since COVID started. And he's got 4 kids. You know what? I'd like to dedicate this episode to my best friend, Bob Shipper, without whom I never would have discovered this amazing genre of music that made me feel all the things that I needed to feel as a loner in the 8th grade in this Catholic school where I had no friends and the teachers thought I was a heathen, and Bob Shipper was I looked up to him, and he's a great guy today. And sorry, Bob, that I bought you this, that you already had it. And that's basically my story. It's a lot of happy memories. Before we go, I always like to go around and find out what you guys are up to. And then I've got one more video clip that I'll play on the outro. Johnny Metal, you and I are going to be seeing each other on Sunday, I believe.
correct.
Because we're recording your next episode.
We are. So that we've got that coming up. So let's see. I've got something with Daniel over on Bicycle Legs this weekend as well. So we'll be
Excellent.
recording something on Saturday. Just like you dedicate your episode. Well, Mike and Dave, you guys were my blood brothers back then, and the trouble we got into just listening to some of the metal music we got into is always heartwarming. But I can't. I have to thank my family for getting me into. You saw my musical journey. It was all over the place. Maybe I didn't tell all the stories with it, but I have my family to thank for that. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about my great nephew Sammy.
Sammy the champion.
Sammy the champion. 1 year, 1 year scans came back clean. For those who, just to give you guys a quick thing, I have a great nephew who's 4 years old, and he was diagnosed with a very rare pediatric cancer called AT/RT. There is no stages to this thing. You either got it or you don't. And it's very, very rare. It's not something they have a lot of knowledge about, but, and I apologize now, I'm taking this as a pedestal to put this out there, but, it's something that just hits infants, toddlers. We're hoping that the thought here is by the time he gets to about 8, that the possibility of this thing reoccurring drops dramatically. So hopefully he can keep on going with clean scans. He has maintenance chemo for the rest of this year, but he has been just the light of my family's life, my brother especially. And so so I just thank you for just I just had to get that out there. And, Sammy means the world to me. And I hope one day I can introduce him to some of this great music too. So
Good sentiment. Johnny Metal, check him out. My Music Corner, give him a subscribe. He is currently doing the entire Judas Priest discography, so this is the perfect time to subscribe. Metal Roger, you and I shall be working together in the future, but do you have anything currently on the burners?
Other than doing a show with John, and we are discussing my favorite Priest album,
Which is what?
Painkiller.
Painkiller, okay. So that'll be a few weeks ahead.
Nothing else to do unless I'm asked.
we'll get there.
Excellent.
Oh, and while we're dedicating things, I would like to dedicate this show to my wife.
Yes, I agree.
Because she
Rock
hates
on, Liz.
90% of my music. And poor lady.
Bless her. And plus,
We love
I mean,
Liz.
she has to deal with this guy who eats habanero peppers all the time, or whatever.
Habanero, ghost
peppers.
pepper.
There you go.
Way to
Mr.
go.
Little, I'm sure that you have something cooking either with the Contrarians or with Peter.
There are a couple of episodes in the can, I think, that haven't gone up. So I do host videos for the Contrarians. I am not an official Contrarian.
Okay.
So it's an interesting relationship. I offered to help them out because they needed some help when they were going through some personnel changes, and somehow I'm like an unofficial guy, but I'm retired. I'm only 55, but I am retired, and I refuse to do anything that looks like an actual job. So I'm like, no, I don't want to be involved in anything except I will host the occasional show for you, as long as it doesn't start to feel like it's a burden on me and somebody else does the editing. So I am like a lamprey on the butt of the Contrarians.
I would like to say today, I relate to some of that because that was my Friday at work. Did not want to deal with any of the crap.
See, there's nothing better than being retired, people. I hope everyone gets to do it someday. Johnny Metal and I, let me throw this out. We were recently in a book by Martin Popoff
Right.
on. I wish I had my copy of the books to hold up. I've now done 4 with Martin. So we're both in this book on Robert Plant, Pictures at 11. I'm in the book on Thin Lizzy, The Truth Is No Excuse. And I also did books on The Cure and Blue Oyster Cult, where we do these panel books going through the albums song by song. Yes, Dominance and Submission. And if anybody gets a chance, I did an interview with Martin Popoff for his book, Perfect Water, The Rebel Imaginos, which is up on YouTube. I don't think it's gotten the attention because it's a very specialized video.
And that's on the Contrarians channel?
That's on the Contrarians channel. Check it out because it's a really fascinating conversation. And that's what I got going on. And Mike, thank you so much for inviting me tonight.
Oh, thank you, sir. I really appreciate it, and I hope we get to do some more stuff in the coming months. Mr. Jex Russell, you and I have a show coming up in 2 weeks. We are doing on Good Friday at a special afternoon time, 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern. You and I will be doing the top 5 albums from our birth years. So 1972 and 1985. And fingers are crossed, our good buddy Harrison Kopp will hopefully be well enough by then to submit his own list on video. We're hoping. Get well soon, Harrison. Things are looking up. What else do you have going on, Jex?
Before Jex answers that question, what month were you born in 85?
October.
October. You mean to say I have 2 T-shirts from concerts that are older than you?
I guess so.
My God. Okay,
My
go
Judas
ahead.
Priest shirt that I still own is older than Jex.
Yeah, the Iron Maiden and Motley Crue shirts are both older than Jex.
Okay, so Jex, now that you've been made to feel like a child, what else do you have cooking?
Roger is younger than me, I believe. Just saying.
Yeah, but they're
I don't mind being the youngest one on here.
It's all good. Other than that, okay, yeah, I don't really have a lot of shows lined up right now. But tomorrow I am releasing a blog post right down here, jexcalibur.wordpress.com, and it's this topic.
it'll be an
how did I get into
expanded
metal?
version of your story, really.
Yeah, because I had notes taken down. I'm like, hey, I didn't have anything going on this week as far as blog posts. I thought, hey, I'm just gonna kind of expand my notes and turn it into a story, and it came out pretty good because I gave you guys a kind of like condensed version. So here I go really into detail of how I was actually terrified of metal as a kid, and a great story about my cousin Cynthia scaring me with Metallica. So check that. It drops at midnight Eastern time, so it'll be there in the morning.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you once again. I hope it won't be too long before we're all working together again. I'm going to run one more clip as we go out. This is just a collection of what they call bumpers on Much Music for the Pepsi Power Hour, showing a variety of musicians. See how many you can name. And then I'll probably run a Max the Axe video, just because we always like to promote Max the Axe. So thank you, gentlemen. Again, absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending your Friday with me, and I wish you all a great weekend. Here's a collection of Much Music bumpers. We will see you in 2 weeks with Jex Russell. Cheers, everyone. Good night.
Rock forever.
All right.
Yeah.
Disgusting, devil-worshipping rock and roll! Turn it off, children! Turn off this rock and roll! It's rotting your brains! It's making you sick, disgusting, sick motherfucker! Stop it! No!
I'll roll.
What do you think this is, the holiday?
Every Thursday, Much Music is changing more people over to the molten sounds of the Pepsi Power Hour. It's an hour of industrial strength music for industrial strength people. So turn your speakers to 11, warn the neighbors, and we promise no George Michael or Rick Astley. All right. The Pepsi Power Hour, Thursdays on Much Music.
Hi, this is Ricky Rocket. And this is Brett Michaels of Poison, and you're watching the Power Hour on Much Music. Ow! Just to see you, and I know you cannot wait.
Hi, this is Lita Ford, and you're watching the nation's music station, Much Music.
This is Lips. And this is Dave. And this is Beast. A shedding beast. And if you like dogs and metal, then stay tuned, because it's all here on the Pepsi Power Hour.
David Lee Roth.
He's Ronnie James Dio. Well, I don't know who you are, pal, but I think you... I'm a new guy. Oh, it's Craig Golding. We're both in Dio. And you're watching the Power Hour on Much Music. Hi, I'm Rick Emmett from Triumph, and you're watching the Power Hour on Much Music.
Coming up, Lita Ford Band on the Pepsi Power Hour, along with music from
I'm
Sword.
David Coverdale from Whitesnake, and you're watching Power Hour on Much Music. The best.
Is this love that I'm feeling? Is this the love that I'm feeling? He's so professional, I hate him.
Tune in to the Pepsi Power Hour for Capital Punishment Monday.
I'm Jeff Pilson, and you're watching the Pepsi Power Hour on Much Music. That's right.
off.